open the floor to some questions and answers. Please chat again on the bottom to the left. Please send your questions to us via chat, and then we'll pick them, and then you can speak very quickly about your question, and then the senator will answer it. Then after that, which we'd like to do for about maybe 10, 15 minutes, we'll wrap that segment up. And then we have Jack Howard, who's the Senior Vice President of Congressional Public Affairs at the U.S. Chamber, who's also available to speak. So thank you, Senator, for making Jack available to us. He'll answer some questions as well, and then we'll have a wrap up by VJ Smith. And so let me just do a quick run through who's on the call here. We have, of course, a cross section of businesses that are on. VJ Smith, for example, who's our chair, works for Marathon Petroleum Senator, and he'll do the wrap up conversations. But we have other members of our board, like Carlos Keating, who works for the Hub International, he's on, and others. We have the fire chief locally who's on. We have our city manager, Tommy Gonzalez. Claudio Ordaz is meant to be on, as is Joe Moody, Representative Ortega, Representative Blanco, and Representative Fierro are meant to be on too. And I know Representative Fierro's on because we just said hello to him. Our county judge also is joining shortly, as is his team. We have Liam from the workforce here as well. We have members of our Progress 321 team. We have folks from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Cindy and her team are also on, as are Ted Houghton, who represents our Mobility Coalition, Dr. Chidori from UTEP, who is working with NASA on some very interesting research. And then, of course, I thought it was very important that we have a good, strong representation from our healthcare segment. So we have David Shimp and his team at Del Sol Hospital. We have Don Carl with Las Palmas. We have Jacob Citron from University Medical Center. We have Cindy Stout from Children's Hospital. It's meant to be on. Monica from Providence, Vargas, Rob Anderson, Tasha Harbor from Providence, Ruben Vogt from UMC, and then of course, Dr. Alosi from DeSol as well. So that's who's meant to be on today. And all of us are here, obviously, Senator, to say thank you for your time. And we very much appreciate you spending time with us and being able to tell us what's happening in DC and take some questions. So without further ado, sir, I'll turn the stage over to you.
David, I got on.
Well, thank you, David, for those remarks, and I appreciate you and our friends at the El Paso Chamber and Hispanic Chamber for making this possible. It's amazing how much work you can get done using modern technology. Of course, 2 weeks ago, I'd never heard of Zoom. But I'm using it multiple times a day, along with Skype and the like, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Congress has so far passed 3 bills to bolster resources, both for our healthcare providers and to support workers and businesses that have been impacted by the economic fallout of this virus. I'd like to walk you through the main provisions of the most recent bill. It's the CARES Act that was signed into law a week ago last Friday, and has already brought nearly $5.8 million in recovery grants to the city of El Paso alone so far. If you had told me 2 months ago, I would have voted for a $2.2 trillion appropriation bill, and that bill would have been unanimous in the Senate, I would not have believed it. But such is the emergency that we are currently engaged in. I agree with the characterization of others that our nation is really on a war footing, and we need to be, and these are unprecedented times. So to start with, in the CARE Act, we provided for $100 billion for hospitals. We know hospitals have been hit particularly hard because they've had to forego their usual elective surgery, and now they have to keep beds vacant for potential surges of COVID-19 patients, knowing that for most of us, you can recover at home, but for some people, like Boris Johnson, for example, in England, they have to go into the ICU, may need oxygen assistance, and maybe even in the worst cases have to get on ventilators. But we know that also our frontline healthcare providers need the personal protective equipment, the masks, the gloves, and the like, so that they can treat patients who are positive safely. We've also tried to jumpstart the process of clinical trials for potential cures. And you've heard a lot about those. Those need to be tested in double-blind trials to make sure they're both safe and effective, as well as the work that's being undertaken at warp speed for making a vaccine, which will be an essential component of the ending of this virus, at least in terms of its pandemic threat. And then we have to deal with the economic consequences of this virus. Many businesses, through no fault of their own, have had to close their doors. Many people have lost their jobs and they have no income. So the first thing we did was try to make sure that people who have lost their income get financial assistance as soon as possible. Now, that's a relative term for the federal government, but Secretary Mnuchin said he hopes to get the money in people's bank accounts within 2 or 3 weeks. And that was a week ago, so hopefully in the next week or two. A family of 4 in El Paso with a household income of up to $150,000 can receive up to $3,400. And that's a grant that's not, doesn't need to be repaid. And that's really a lifeline for people who are not receiving any income now, again, through no fault of their own. And then we've vastly expanded unemployment insurance availability. We've expanded eligibility for an additional 13 weeks. We provided an additional $600 a week in federal unemployment benefits on top of the state's portion. And we've expanded the eligibility to cover independent contractors, gig workers, and the like, and even nonprofits. So we need to give people the resources they need in order to cover their expenses until the smoke clears, which hopefully, I know we are hoping to see that bending of the curve that we've all been talking about very soon, and we can begin then talking about what happens next. But for small businesses, which are the lifeblood of our economy, we established a $350 billion Paycheck Protection program through your local lenders that are certified by the Small Business Administration. The goal of this was to allow cash flow assistance to small businesses, because we don't want them to shut down and not reopen after this crisis passes. We want them to hold on to their employees if they possibly can. And so we want to provide them assistance. These are in the form of low interest loans. They're at 1%. They can be used to cover everything from payroll to supply chain disruptions to paying the rent. But here's the hook. If employers are able to maintain their payroll until June, then these loans will be completely forgiven. And so in terms of applying for the loans, I'd recommend that you talk to your local bank and credit unions. We've been working with a lot of the national and Texas associations. And so some of the initial glitches and the need for further refinement of direction from the Treasury and the like has been forthcoming. And so far, I believe that $71 billion has already been lent on a program that just started last Friday. And despite some of the bumps and difficulties, it's obviously serving a very real need. So much so that I just got an email from the majority leader that he and Senator Schumer are negotiating an agreement, hopefully by unanimous consent, on Thursday to add an additional $250 billion, $250 billion to that fund. So this is a completely new system. We tried to bypass the normal bureaucracy and get it directly to your local lender with whom you already have a relationship. But I'd encourage you to talk to them as you talk to the SBA, and the chamber obviously can help. And I'd encourage all of you to apply sooner rather than later. I visited countless small businesses in El Paso, like H&H Car Wash, great chow there as well. And we got to make sure that those businesses that we love and depend on can weather this storm. My staff has been in touch with many of you about the process to apply, and I'm glad Jack Howard from the U.S. Chamber is on the call, and he can certainly answer any additional questions you may have. Finally, I would say there's a huge amount of money, another $500 billion that was appropriated in this CARES Act that will be available for loans to businesses that need that have collateral and can enter into an agreement with a lending facility that's being stood up by the Federal Reserve. As you know, a lot of major employers employ tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people, and we need to provide them some assistance too. And so that's the third leg of the stool of the CARES Act, so to speak, the individual payments, the small business grants, and then the Fed's lending capacity to do based on collateralized low interest loans that hopefully will tide over some of our larger employers during this very difficult time. So thanks again to all of you for making it possible for me to join you today. And I'm happy to take or dodge a few questions, David, as the case may be.
I understand entirely, sir. Thank you very much. Before I ask everybody to, again, just chat me your questions, and we'll ask them with you, and then you can speak. But I think really quick, before we go to the Q&A, we have two folks that are on that just want to take a moment to say hello. We have Mayor Margo and also our County Judge Samaniego on the call. And if you gentlemen don't mind, maybe Mr. Mayor, I can ask you just to say hello real quick first.
Sure, Senator. I just got off, I left a call with the governor, and he had Kevin Brady on there covering some of the same points you are. But one of the other persons he had on was the head of the Texas Workforce Commission, and he said, people are having trouble applying, and the word out there for the chambers to get the word out is reapply. They've restaffed their people. And the reminder was, even if you've been a part of an economy that normally, from a job standpoint, you would not think you would qualify for this, such as the gig economy and some other things, to please apply, that the rules are different now. And I want to thank you, Senator, for your help with Fort Bliss and the things we're trying to do, and leveraging potentially the need for Beaumont, as discussed with Beaumont, about being a backup if it gets to that. But we're hopeful it won't get to that. But I appreciate your help and your staff's help.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. County Judge, if you'd like to say a few things.
Absolutely, David. David, thank you for, as always, connecting us to the right situations, scenarios, and people. And so we thank the Chamber and your leadership. Senator, I had met you in another difficult situation here August 3rd. We have a tremendous community, but we have a very a different type of community. So anytime that someone outside of El Paso reaches out and has these kinds of discussions, really helps us, because we're in a very unique situation. We've got the complexity right now with our migrant or immigration situations with the refugees, and we have to address some of those issues. I was in a conference call earlier with a group of people concerned about detentions and what happens, and the lack of information that we have with some of these agencies as far as knowing what are some of their challenges and how they're handling them and so forth. So I really thank you, because we really need people like yourself and at the level that you're at to truly understand how much more complex our community is than most communities in Texas. And so whatever help that we get is extremely very welcomed. We have a great community. But we do need to have people reach out a little bit more and understand some of the challenges that we have here in El Paso. So I thank you on behalf of our community and the things that you've done for our community.
Well, Judge, you know, when I was a kid, my dad was stationed at William Beaumont Hospital. So I claimed some street cred there in El Paso. So I know it's a wonderful, wonderful community, and used to be my home, but I'm proud to represent El Paso along with the rest of the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, County Judge. Appreciate it very much. Representative Fierro, would you like to say a comment?
Well, I echo the mayor and the county judge, and I want to thank them for their leadership, being the forefront, making those tough decisions for our community. I know that they have an open communication with the senator, and it's something that as a community we really need to utilize and take advantage of. Again, I mentioned earlier that the senator has always been available for us as a community when it came to community college issues, And we're in a position now where we need to all get together and work off of each other. And David, thank you for putting this call together.
It's an absolute pleasure. If I could, I could relay one question that has come in that I think is important to discuss. Senator, as you mentioned, you have, with a lot of hard work from our colleagues, your colleagues up in Washington, D.C., let me rephrase, have gotten us this PPP passed, this payroll protection plan, which some people here are calling it the U.S. Marshall Plan, to give you an idea how well it's being received and how appreciated it is. But there's also a discussion, it is new. Banks are having a hard time figuring out how to roll it out. But I think everybody's working together, and I see a lot of people, I think, making smart decisions around this plan, and it'll take a little bit of time, but I think it'll be a very fast injection of money, much needed money, into businesses, and will keep people employed. But there is, I believe there is discussion already about a part 2. Can you give us an idea what that might look like?
Yeah, we've now passed 3 pieces of legislation. The biggest, obviously, this $2.2 trillion, which if you told me 2 months ago, I would have voted for a $2 trillion package, and the vote would have been unanimous in the Senate. I would not have believed it. But we do recognize the emergency nature of this crisis, and we have to defeat the virus, and we will. And we have to deal with the incredible economic consequences of this, which will put us in a recession the first and second quarter. And if we do our job through this lifeline, this economic recovery, will come back in the third quarter, and these businesses will continue to exist along with the jobs they provide. So we've tried to come up with a new approach, in addition to the individual assistance through the Payment Protection Program. I know this probably won't work for everybody, because some businesses may just simply don't have the cash, even with this help, to keep their payroll in place. But if they can, that obviously provides some relief to your workforce. It provides a connection for them. You don't have to worry about trying to find somebody to fill those jobs when this crisis passes. And apparently it's so successful. I think the figure I just saw was $71 billion has already been lent out of the initial $350 billion that was appropriated. And now Senator Schumer, Senator McConnell are talking about passing an additional $250 billion to supplement it, to make sure that we don't run out of that money. So we are spending a lot of money, but it's absolutely necessary in this emergency circumstance. I agree with those who said that our nation has to be on a war footing to defeat both this virus and the economic consequences. And then we need to learn some really important lessons from this experience to make sure it never happens again.
I very much like that idea of learning some lessons. A lot of folks on the ground are actually saying this is sort of a 3-pronged crisis. It's a healthcare crisis, obviously, and that's the root cause of this. It's not a financial failure in any way. This is a virus. Right. So it's very different from previous sort of financial crisis, but it is a healthcare crisis that has led to a business crisis, obviously. And I think the federal government and state and our county governments are doing a great deal, and our city are doing a great deal to try to help soften the harsh realities of this crisis. But it's also been noted that it's an information crisis. And that's why things like this are very helpful, because people are looking for good resources and good places to turn for information. And one of the things that's coming up in that space right now, before I get to another question that just came in, and 2 that just came in that are interesting, is there thinking about economic stimulus beyond things like the PPP and insurance for unemployed? Are we looking at an infrastructure plan?
Well, I think we're trying to see, we don't know how long this is going to last. And so we're really assessing it as we go along. We're trying to do what we think is a smart thing and an effective thing. But, my hope is that once we come up with the effective cure, and as you know, there are hundreds of clinical trials going on all around the world now to come up with an effective cure, and then work toward a vaccine, which probably would not be available until the earliest is in September, that by doing the sorts of things that we're all doing now, by sheltering in place, by social distancing and washing, good personal hygiene, we can bend that curve and break the back of the virus. So I won't say, I won't predict, let me put it that way, where we'll be in about three or 4 months, but whatever it takes, we'll come through this. This will be, I think, other than, 9/11, September the 11th, 2001, when we were attacked by terrorists, and the financial crisis in 2008, where Wall Street had a complete meltdown along with the banking system. This is the third crisis that sort of reaches that level. It's really an existential threat to our country and our way of life. And I like to think that at times like this is when it brings out the best in our communities, like El Paso, our state, and our country. And I think that so far is reflected by the kind of bipartisan work that we've done together to address both the public health and the economic crisis.
Let me jump to a couple of other questions that are coming in. One that was addressed to us that I can answer very quickly. The two banks that we've been working with at the chamber with the folks that are trying to get through the PPP are Bank of America and Westar Bank. Both have been very forward-leaning. They have specialists, and what we can do is we will connect you with them as soon as the call's finished. But the other one that has come up from one of our former chairs, Carlos Keating, who of course is a special friend of the chamber as a result, is he's asked a question. Carlos, do you want to jump on and ask your question real quick?
Yeah, I would. Thanks, David. And thank you again, Senator, for your time. One question that I get consistently that I don't have a great answer for, and I just was wondering what the conversation around it in Washington might be, is force majeure. Has that been a topic, and how maybe the government would intervene or not intervene? Just curious what you've heard or talked about. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there has been some discussion about that, and given the urgency with which we have had to act, we've tried to be as efficient as we can. There've been some discussion about force majeure clauses and insurance contracts and the like, and what insurance might cover, what it might not cover, whether the model that we're using now or a business interruption model through traditional insurance carriers might be an alternative. There has been some discussion, like we've covered the waterfront, but nothing specifically in that regard.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
One of the things that I have to comment on too, to sort of underline the point with you from businesses' perspective here in El Paso, we have been very ably led in this crisis. The city, the county, our state representatives, and certainly our federal representatives, Veronica, yourself, and others have been huge helps as we're trying to get through these issues. And let us say thank you, because I think it's obvious that the healthcare professionals have been doing a hero's work at this point. But I think it's also important to note that how grateful we are for the good leadership in the middle of a crisis like this. It's very helpful, and it does come down to leadership in so many ways. So thank you for that. The other thing that I would like to highlight very quickly is that we have one of the county commissioners who sent in a question. David, are you on? David Stout?
Yes, I'm on.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read the question. I typed it in the chat there, but thank you, Senator, of course, for taking the time to speak with us today. My name is David Stout. I'm a county commissioner. I represent Precinct 2, which is Central El Paso. And I just want to bring up that, many immigrants were left out of the CARES Act, especially when it comes to the financial relief, the checks that you're talking about, as well as unemployment insurance. And many of these people pay the same taxes that you and I do. They also happen to be among some of our most vulnerable people and populations. And so many of them and so many of them work in businesses, in the service industries like hotels and restaurants, which are really struggling right now, closing down, laying people off. And I feel like these folks are now being disproportionately affected because not only do they not have jobs anymore, but they have no way to receive any relief. And without them, many of our businesses here in El Paso, in Texas, and in the country would not be able to operate during normal times. So I'd like to advocate for including these people in any future packages that are proposed and possibly passed, and would like to ask you if you would support something like this, and if not, can you please explain why?
Sure. Commissioner, thank you for the question, and I know what you just described is very real. The challenge we have is, my biggest frustration since I've been in the Senate is our inability to deal sensibly with our immigration system. It's been a disappointment to me every time we've tried, and I did not want to derail the emergency relief here by getting involved in a debate over immigration, which this invariably would lead to. Again, like the judge said, and like the mayor and you've alluded, El Paso is a unique community, and but I must say that that it's not likely for us to be able to persuade the majority of Congress or the president that we ought to distribute the benefits of this to non-citizens. There are other ways in which we can help, though. We are providing $11.2 billion in aid to the state that can be distributed on a per capita basis. The majority of the money will come through the governor's office, but this will be direct assistance for communities and for the state based on per capita. And how the community decides to use that money is going to be up to local leaders like you and the judge and the mayor. So no designated funds, because I think it would, unfortunately, we would not be able to succeed in doing what we've done now if we get diverted into that debate. But I think there are indirect assistance that you will find useful.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. And just one last note. You know, quoting you earlier, you said we're on war footing here in unprecedented times, and so maybe you can use that in your future conversations with folks, and if the issue comes up again. Thank you so much for your answer and for your.
Thank you very much.
On our behalf. Okay.
Senator, what I'd like to do, if I could, is we have several members of the healthcare community on the call. I won't pick one because I think that's a bit unfair on the fly, but I will ask one of them maybe just to spend a minute or two just describing what it's like on the ground here so you can hear it from them directly. Monica, David, Jacob, if you don't mind, if it's not too big an imposition, could I ask you just to give the senator a small briefing on what's happening on the coal face of the virus here? I think they're being very shy.
This is Jacob from University Medical Center.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. You did visit our facility during that mass shooting event that occurred in August, and I appreciated your support. I will tell you that locally, you know, all the hospitals are working really well together in formulating our surge plan and looking for ways that we can support one another. Clearly, the challenges have been in getting PPE down here. We know that, you know, some of the costs have really increased and access to them has really been diminished. So as we continue to encourage manufacturing to increase their access, their supply to the state and access for them to the local areas like ourselves would be greatly appreciated. I think helping us certainly with William Beaumont, the new William Beaumont that is getting ready to be released hopefully soon as a potential surge site is going to be very beneficial. When you look at that with medical gases and emergency power versus a civic center, certainly better positioned to provide care for those that need to overflow to those facilities. We would like to thank you for the stimulus package. Now, the biggest concerns I think the hospitals have is We've had elective surgeries, which generate a lot of revenue for us, now postponed unless it's emergent. Because of that, we are carrying staff that really the volume and the revenue doesn't support, in part because part of the initiative is we have to prepare for surge. We've tried to empty as much of our hospital as possible so that we're prepared to take on an excess surge capacity. But in order to do that, you still need to keep your staffing for the most part, because the beds mean nothing unless you have the staff to run it. And so the challenge between lowered revenue and increased expenses is really difficult for all of us. The stimulus package and the third one for the $100 billion is beneficial, but I guess really the concern is how are the hospitals going to be able to directly access that to overcome some of the expenses that we've incurred in prepping for the COVID-19 surge?
Well, we'll some of it's indirect, obviously, and you mentioned PPE, the personal protective equipment and the like, but we'll get you some more specific information on how your hospital and your hospitals in El Paso can access this. Early on, I know I had a conference call with the Texas Hospital Association, and of course, every hospital is in a little bit different situation, rural hospitals versus urban or suburban hospitals. So we tried to come up with a formula that works, but one of the benefits of having this conversation with you is you can help us figure out what didn't work the way we intended it to, where the gaps are, and where we just need to do more. So we can share with you some of the specifics about how to access that $100 billion and the Texas share. But we also would love to continue the conversation so you can help us fill those gaps and do more where we need to.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. I will, before we bring on Jack Howard, who I hope is prepared and ready in the wings here, there was one more question that I think perhaps I could just relate for Chris Linder and Ray Sanchez. Basically, the very similar kind of question is that it goes more to something you mentioned, Senator, earlier in your comments about lessons learned. And it's more of the fact that have we been running our playbook on a pandemic, and are we ready for the next one? What do you think is maybe some initial lessons learned for us coming, as we begin already, I guess, to look at the day after?
Yeah, well, we can start with making sure that our medical supply chain isn't dependent on China. Obviously, when they experienced their own, the virus originated there, and once it began to spread around the world and they shut down they're starting to come back, then it wasn't possible for us to get the medication or the medical supplies that we had depended on them to provide. So supply chain is something that I think we need to change. We also need to look at this as at least the second one of these viruses that emanated from these wet markets where that jumps from human to humans from animals. And we need to engage China diplomatically, because this has been a hugely damaging to them and their economy. And you would think that this is somewhere where we could find common ground because this has obviously affected the world as a pandemic. But, it's a funny thing about human nature. I remember back in 2005, President George W. Bush talked about needing to prepare for pandemics. And I think he had just got through reading this book, The Great Influenza, about the 1918 influenza that killed tens of millions of people, maybe as many as 100 million people around the world. And he established an office to deal with pandemics. But, human nature is, as time goes by, other things compete for your attention and the money that we would invest in this program. And I think what we need to learn here is that this can't depend on what happens from administration to administration or Congress to Congress. We need to have a permanent all of government approach to stop these pandemics if possible. But if not, we need reliable global institutions like the World Health Organization, which apparently collaborated with China to delay the dissemination of these infections coming from China. And meanwhile, people flew all over the world and spread it. So those are just some of the things, and I'm sure there are more that will occur to us, but those are some of the more obvious ones.
Senator, thank you. What I would like to do is a bunch of questions just came in, but if it would be okay, I think I've used up all the time you've allocated and actually worked a little bit into Mr. Howard's time as well. So I apologize, Jack. But if we could, we'll take the questions that have come in subsequent. And if we could work with your very able staff, Jonathan and others, to get them to you, and perhaps we can get some answers that way. If that would be okay.
Sure.
If I could ask Jack, if you're ready, maybe do you mind sharing some of your thoughts from the U.S. Chamber perspective? I think Jack's on, but we'll wait a second to see. Sometimes it takes a moment to unmute and all that. Well, maybe what we can do is we can do one more question. We're waiting for Jack, and we'll see what happens here. This one is we're waiting for Jack Howard. I'm getting a question who. It's Jack Howard. That's the folks that we're waiting for from the U.S. Chamber of Congressional Public Affairs. So my staff is trying to chase him right now. Really quickly though, a question came in from Carl Dwyer at the county. Carl, are you on?
Yes, David, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. If you can go ahead and ask your question. Thank you, Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Senator. Thank you, as everybody else. Thank you for your time and addressing the group. My question was a recent retired veteran and healthcare background myself, and the Department of Defense, with the creation of the Defense Health Agency, is looking at massive, considerable reductions across the military healthcare force structure. And my question to you and maybe to some of your peers is, is that idea or that decision being relooked or reconsidered now, especially in light of all of the assistance that the military healthcare system has been called upon to provide responding to this pandemic?
Yeah, Carl, I think this maybe is a good time to reconsider some of that, given the importance that the military is playing. One of the first calls I got was from Mayor Margo about Fort Bliss and providing some assistance to the city, which we were able to secure. But when it comes to logistics and just getting things to where they need to be, to building hospitals and other facilities, providing personnel to run equipment, and that there's nobody that does it better or is better organized than the United States military. So yeah, I think you make a good point. And as part of our lessons learned here, I hope we have an all of government review over how we allocate our resources and what sort of threats we need to be ready for. It's hard to be ready for everything all the time, but this strikes me as something that has been so bad, so frightening to all of us, because we simply just don't know where it all ends, that this is something that ought to be a priority that we would plan for in that all government response. And so the health professionals in the United States military would be an essential component of that.
Thank you, Senator. I just learned that we have a very able addition from the U.S. Chamber, a fellow named John Gonzalez, who we all know and love out here in El Paso. John, do you want to take a stab at filling in for Jack for a moment?
David, can you hear me?
We can, John. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I know Jack is trying. He's on the call, and I believe he's trying to get on the call. I'm not sure what the problem is, but yeah, until he's manages to get that done. Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Great to see you, even though it's a video, but great to see you. Thank you for everything that you all are doing. The CARES Act was a.
John, are you on?
Yes, there. Okay, there's
Okay.
Jack.
All right. Good.
Okay,
Thank
David,
you.
can you hear Jack?
We can. And why don't you just make an introduction, if you could, and a couple of comments, and then we'll turn it over to Jack. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again for hosting this important conference call and video webinar. Local chambers are in the front lines of everything we're doing, trying to get this information out as quickly and as much as possible. These companies, these small businesses are making real-time decisions based on this information. So it's so important that we get it right. And thank you so much for partnering with us and doing everything that you do for the local business community there. And thank you, Senator Cornyn. Jack Howard is our Senior VP of Congressional and Public Affairs. And welcome, Jack. Take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, John. Sorry about the confusion. I'm not sure maybe I hit the wrong button or something. I'm not sure, but I heard all of Senator Cornyn. I don't know whether Senator Cornyn is still on or not, but I just wanted to thank him, first of all, on behalf of the entire whole U.S. Chamber of Commerce for all his help in making this bill much better as it went along and was being considered and debated by the Senate. It took a lot of work on his part, a lot of the Senate Republicans. So we appreciate that. And just make sure the group understood how critical a role he played in really improving, particularly a lot of the features important to the business community. I'm not going to do any better than he did in terms of outlining the major provisions of the bill, but I did just want to drill down for a little while on some of the programs he talked about, the Paycheck Protection Program. There's another program that's available to small businesses called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And then for employers, there's a tax credit. So let me just go back on the Paycheck Protection Program. I think most people who are trying to deal with are fairly generally familiar with some of the application processes. But just so we're all on kind of the same page, for those of you who may not have tried yet, I do want to point out that starting on although small businesses and sole proprietorships are already applying for the loans, starting Friday, independent contractors and self-employed individuals can also apply for loans. And as Senator Cornyn pointed out, that money's going fast. As he said, over $70 billion has already been lent out of the money, and we're hoping the Senate on Thursday can clear by unanimous consent a replenishment of that. And then we're working hard on House and Democratic and Senate and Republican leaders to try to get that through the House too by unanimous consent. So just to kind of go back and drill down a little deeper on the Paycheck Protection Program, who's eligible for the loan? If you're a small business employee, 500 employees or less, or if your business is industry that has what they call an employee-based size standard through the SBA that's higher than 500 employees. So, for example, if you're a restaurant or a hotel or a business that falls within what they call the NAICS standard, which is the North American Industry Classification System, basically deals with businesses that are in food services and accommodations. And each of your locations has 500 employees or fewer, you are eligible. That also goes for tribal businesses, 501c19 veterans organizations, 501c3 profits, including religious organizations. There's been some confusion about that. So I wanted to clarify that for the group. There's also been some questions about whether independent contractors or gig economy workers can apply, or are they eligible? The answer is yes. As I said, sole proprietors, that starts on Friday. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, gig economy workers, and self-employed individuals are all eligible for the PPP program. The maximum amount available for qualifying small businesses is 250% of your average monthly payroll expenses, with a total of $10 million. And the way they calculate that, I would encourage you to go to our website. We have a pretty detailed formula in terms of what counts as payroll expenses and what does not. But the basics are that it's intended to cover 8 weeks of payroll expenses and any additional amounts for making payments towards debt obligations. So the way that would work is the 8-week period can be applied to any time frame beginning February 15th, 2020 and June 30th, 2020. And for people who are in the seasonal businesses, they'll be measured a little differently using a 12-week period beginning February 15th, 2019 or March 1st, 2019, whichever the seasonal employer chooses. The other question we get a lot of is what is the covered period for the loan? And basically the simple answer is the covered period during which expenses can be forgiven extends from, as I said, February 15th of 2020 to June 30th, 2020, and borrowers can choose which 8 weeks they want to have count during that time. So let's say you get the loan, how can you use the money such that the loan will actually be forgiven, as Senator Cornyn indicated before? Again, it's somewhat complicated formula. You can look at our website and you'll get more information on that. But basically, the amount of the principal that can be forgiven is equal to the sum of expenses for payroll, including benefits, existing interest payments on mortgages incurred before February 15th, 2020, rent payments and leases that are enforced before February 15th, 2020, as well as utility service agreements for which service began before February 15th, 2020. So that's the key date, February 15th, 2020. But be aware, however, that at least 75% of the forgiven amount has to have been used for payroll. So in other words, they're expecting that not more than 25% of the forgiven amount may be used for non-payroll costs. So if you want to use the PPP program for other business-related expenses like inventory, you can, but that portion of the loan will not be forgiven. So real quickly, I'll go over this, what actually counts as payroll costs, because you're going to want to know this when you're applying. What counts as payroll costs under the PPP program includes salary, wages, commissions, or tips capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. It also includes employee benefits, including costs for vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, and payments that are required for group health care benefits. So that's basically the formula that they use. As I said, it's capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. How much of your loan can actually be forgiven? Again, Senator Cornyn said at the outset, the purposes of the program is to help you retain your employees at their current base pay. So if you keep all of your employees, the entirety of the loan will be forgiven. However, if you still lay off employees, the forgiveness will be reduced by the % decrease in the number of employees. So if your total payroll expenses on workers making less than $100,000 annually decreases by more than 25%, then your loan forgiveness will be reduced by that same amount. And if you have already laid off some employees, you can still be forgiven for the full amount of the loan of your payroll costs if you rehire those employees by June 30th. So again, this is all incentivized toward keeping your employees on the payroll, and for those who you might have had to lay off, the idea is to try to encourage you to bring them back by June 30th. So when does the loan actually get forgiven? It's forgiven at the end of the 8-week period after you take out the loan. So borrowers, you need to work with your lenders to verify that those expenses I outlined before are covered, so you get the proper amount of forgiveness. You're not responsible for the interest on the loan, and the terms, the interest rate and the terms of the loan that are not forgiven is 1%, and you need to start paying that interest. That interest is deferred for 6 months. Of course, if you want to pay your loan earlier, you can do that in less than 2 years. In order to qualify for the loan, I should have mentioned this earlier, no collateral is needed. There's no personal guarantee requirement. So they're trying to make this as easy as possible. I know there's some glitches on the website and things like that, but they're trying to streamline as much as possible all the kind of pre-qualification requirements that are in place. Documents that you would need to apply, pretty straightforward. You need to complete the loan application on the website, submit the application to an approved lender that's available to process your application. That's on SBA's website. And what you really need to do, the basics are, you need to just certify the following in good faith. The current economic crisis makes the loan necessary to support your ongoing operations. The funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll, as I said before, to make mortgage, lease, and utility payments. That you have not, this is important, that you have not and will not receive another loan under the program, and you will provide to the lender documentation that verifies the number of full-time equivalent employees on your payroll and the dollar amounts of the payroll costs. So that's basically what they're looking for from you. And as I said, you have until June 30th, 2020 to apply. Some people have asked whether you can, if you took a bridge loan out through your state, are you eligible to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program? And the answer is yes. You can take out a state bridge loan and still be eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. So those are kind of some of the more granular details on the. One other thing I should point out also, if you have applied for or received an economic injury disaster loan before the Paycheck Protection Program developed, before you became available, can you refinance that? And the answer is yes, you can. You are able to do that. Some people are trying to do that as well. There are some other smaller SBA programs available. I just wanted to mention to people, there's a debt relief program, in particular 7A program, 501 or 504 program, and micro loans programs. Some of those, the details for those programs are also on SBA's website. So if you're interested in pursuing any of those, I would highly encourage you to look into that. The other feature here I wanted to highlight for a couple of minutes is I alluded to it a couple of times already, the economic injury disaster loan. And there's also a feature in there called the emergency economic injury grant. And the idea there is those grants are intended to provide an emergency advance up to $10,000 to small businesses and private nonprofits within 3 days of applying for an SBA EIDL loan. You have to first apply for an EIDL loan and then request the advance. The important thing here is the advance does not have to be repaid under any circumstance and may be used to keep employees on the payroll, to pay for sick leave, meet whatever supply chain disruption costs you're running into, to pay business obligations, debt, rent, and mortgage payments and things like that. The loans, they are basically lower interest loans, are up to $2 million with the principal and interest deferment up to the SBA administrator's discretion, that are available to pay for expenses that could have been met had the disaster not occurred, including payroll and other operating expenses. This is not a new program, and it's an expansion of an older one. Businesses who are eligible for the following have 500 or fewer employees. That would include sole proprietorships with or without employees, and independent contractors, cooperatives, and employee-owned businesses. So that's the gist of that particular program. Emergency economic injury grants themselves are available from January 31st, so they're retroactive until December 31st, 2020. I do want to point out, some people have asked if you get an EIDL loan and or a grant, can you also get a PPP loan? The answer, you may also apply for the PPP loan, but you can't use them for the same purposes. So they have to be basically for two different purposes. And you cannot apply for more than one loan with several lenders. So I think we're kind of running short on time. I'll cut short my comments and see if anybody has any questions or if I can clarify anything.
Jack, let me just say thank you. I think that was extremely comprehensive. I think you've anticipated almost every question we could have imagined. I will say this, that as good as the chambers are here at working through these different issues, we do nonetheless think we need to adopt you. So if you ever want to come out to El Paso, you let us know.
All right, I may take you up on that. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think it was very comprehensive, and so we will post and do post everything that that you produce out of the U.S. Chamber. We post locally too, because it's very well conceived, and we appreciate that. What I would like to do, if I could, is maybe jump right into the wrap up, because I noticed that folks are needing to sign off a bit. We are very close to time here. So PJ, if you don't mind, could I impose on you to wrap up for the group, please?
Sure, my pleasure, David. Really simply on behalf of the board of the Chamber of Commerce of El Paso, really the wrap-up comments really are comprised of delivering our heartfelt thanks to you, Senator Cornyn, for number one, conducting this call, and for your great leadership. We also want to recognize Mayor Margo and County Judge Samaniego for attending this call, for your comments and your leadership, especially during these times that we're in. Also, thank you for Rep Fierro for joining the call and delivering your comments. We appreciate that. I believe also with our delegation, Rep Moody may have joined the call. We also want to thank Betsy Keller, City Manager Gonzalez for joining the call, and Commissioner Stout, thanks for your comments. And I believe we have Representative Claudia Ordaz on the call as well. Thank you for attending. I can't see everybody's name, David, but is there anybody else we need to recognize for joining?
I think we got them all covered, BJ. Thank you.
Great. I think also our CEO David Jerome has a second career coming as a talk show host. But with that as a closing comment, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We sincerely thank everybody for attending the call. We have several board members on the call that I see. We thank you for your tireless commitment to the chamber and to helping us all move through this process. So thank you to the board. Thank you for everybody who's attending the call. And then I think as a sign off, I would just like to ask Mayor Margo or County Judge Samaniego if you have any closing remarks.
Mayor, you want to go first and then I'll follow?
The mayor just signed off, Judge. So please, if you don't mind, we'd like you to do the last lap for us, please.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's always, like I said, quite a privilege to be able to work in this community and the relationships that we have with the chamber, its members, and the legislation, Senator. This is just a great community that knows how to get together and work hard on whatever we face. And so we thank all that you do, Senator, for us and keeping us in mind. And I know we'll probably be reaching out to you a little more on some of the things that have more of the state and federal complications that go beyond our local abilities. So we thank you. And once again, David, thank you for these kinds of opportunities. Our community needs to be informed, and you've done a great job of doing this. So one last thing I'm trying to put together, and I'm going to ask the chamber to help to put together a forum that we can address as a regional approach to the virus. Juarez is anxious to find out what we can do. New Mexico, our mayor of Las Cruces, is very excited about this regional approach. And so we're trying to create a forum on a weekly basis to allow our community to talk to us and for us to talk to the community. But, we talk a lot about this regional force that we have. Never has this been more important that we do things from a regional perspective. And so very excited about what we could do with these the 3 cities and 2 states and 3 states that we have going forward. So thank you very much. I'll be reaching out to you, David, to help me with this forum that we're putting together.
County judges, we're at your service, and the Senator Cornyn just sent a note saying he's rushing off, but thank you for your comments. County Judge, thank you so much. And he also says thank you for a fantastic call, that El Paso has set a new bar for these going forward. So they're going to be more demanding of the other communities. VJ, anything else you'd like to say? And then we'll call it a wrap today.
That's it. And thank you, Judge Samaniego, for those final comments. Those were great. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, folks, and thank you for participating in today's call.
Thank you.